a nation supposedly founded on the separation of church and state.
We break and divide every demonic confederacy against the election, against America, against that who you have declared to be in the White House.
It's outlined right in the Constitution.
I don't care what you think about fraudulent Sleepy Joe. He's a sex-trafficking, demon-possessed mongrel.
But that separation is vanishing in new and dangerous ways.
We have a responsibility to preserve the foundations, and they are religion and morality, and we have to preserve them in public life.
What was once a simple money grab by a few unscrupulous charlatans.
Whatever you do right now, don't you stop tithing.
I just need more! I just need more!
Has become a coordinated accumulation of wealth and political power.
Preachers began basing their sermons around economic and political matters.
Backed by guns and ammunition.
We need to stock up, team up, and train up like we've never done before.
To reshape the country.
God, country, Constitution, Second Amendment, and homeschooling.
I think it is fair to use the F word, fascism.
It's a radical movement that thinks the only votes that are legitimate are those that support them.
While those who still believe in that separation of church and state, be damned.
God bless America.
For over 70 years, our leaders have told us one thing under the bright lights.
The protection of the lives and property of Americans is the responsibility of all public officials.
I care. We're trying.
We have it so well under control.
Help is here, and we will not stop working for you.
But for decades, America's shadow government and its powerful friends have spent trillions of dollars on an agenda that serves their interests, not ours.
You guys paid for all this.
So when the shit really hits the fan, we're on our own.
This is not science fiction. This is reality in America right now.
The truth is, the rich and powerful will do whatever it takes to save themselves, while the rest of us die. You only have to open your eyes to witness how the teachings of Jesus Christ have inspired millions to help their fellow Americans, both materially and spiritually.
Our goal is to serve the community, and we just praise the Lord for all the opportunity that He's giving us.
But in this nation first founded by persecuted Christians, members of that same faith have used their beliefs to justify the persecution of others. It's right there in the founding documents of one of America's largest churches.
If you go back, they're defending slavery on biblical grounds, and they're calling the ownership of other human beings as part of their sacred rights and privileges. That actually provides a moral frame and actually fuel to the fire that leads to the secession of the southern states.
The endorsement of slavery by many prominent churches helped create an enormous wealth gap. Families that owned human beings were on average 14 times richer than families that did not. The social and economic impact on the African American descendants of slaves would continue generation after generation. But in 1954, the Supreme Court issues a ruling that many hope will begin to shrink the gap. Brown versus Board of Education begins desegregating schools across the country, opening the doors to better funded, once whites-only public schools to black students. In the South, the ruling is seen as a direct threat to the racist power structure.
Education cannot thrive in a climate such as would result from the mixture of the races in the public schools.
I have said in every county in Mississippi that no school in our state will be integrated when I'm new governor.
In response, Southern white elites band together to form what are known as white citizens' councils. The mission: block any form of advancement of blacks by any means necessary.
You're not a Texan if you're not for segregation. But the religion has been taken out of democracy. And I say there is no democracy without religion.
God made them that color, and the only time they ever mixed up is when they violated laws of God and laws of man.
White citizens' councils were made up of some of the South's most prominent politicians, judges, police, and religious leaders. Some are members of the historic Southern Baptist Church, whose preachings helped justify this racist ideology in the South for more than a century.
I believe that we stand on the verge of a historic moment.
The most famous Southern Baptist preacher is Billy Graham.
I have no power to forgive anybody. I have no power to change anybody.
A national celebrity who fills stadiums with devotees hanging on his every word. An even larger audience watches him on TV at home.
There will come a day when men's hearts are literally going to fail them because of fear.
In the early 60s, another religious leader is also garnering a mass following.
One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
After the March on Washington in August of 1963, Billy Graham was asked to comment on the march. He said, "It will only be in heaven that little black children will walk hand in hand with little white children." And so in Graham's theology, these are things that we couldn't hope for on this earth because the problem was too big to be solved. And that is the way that white evangelicals thought about social action and political action in the 1960s. They should be praying. They should not be marching. They should not be engaged in civil disobedience.
Don't ever say it's a white man's religion or a black man's religion. It's a world religion.
The battle for civil rights, led by the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and other black ministers, is largely waged from the pulpits. But few Southern white evangelical leaders join the fight.
It is very hard for people to call Billy Graham a racist. But the fact of the matter is, Billy Graham, like many white male evangelicals of his day, felt that white men should be in power before other people.
When you read people like James Baldwin or Martin Luther King, they're just mystified at why white Christian churches aren't standing up on the side of civil rights.
King openly calls on his white religious counterparts to act.
I think the church, religious organizations have a great deal to do in this period of transition.
Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail is just dripping with this. He's writing that letter as he's sitting in jail for demonstrating for civil rights to the so-called moderate leaders in Birmingham. He says, "Who are these white Christians sitting safely behind their anesthetizing stained glass windows?"
Many Southern pastors were affiliated with segregated religious schools, people like Bob Jones, and he went so far as to call segregation God's established order.
Like churches and other religious organizations, these private, mostly whites-only schools were exempt from paying federal taxes. But many Americans begin to publicly question why.
One of the key issues was concern that racially segregated academies, religious schools, would have their tax privileges taken away from them.
The Internal Revenue Service proposed to make private schools prove they are not practicing racial discrimination or lose their tax-exempt status.
So all these pastors, they got together, they were really concerned, and they felt like they had a right to segregate people by skin color, but also to receive tax exemptions.
But by the 1970s, America is becoming a more inclusive country. Overt racists find themselves shunned, their beliefs mocked by mainstream culture.
I think that, if God had meant us to be together, he'd have put us together. Well, look what he's done. He put you over in Africa, he put the rest of us in all the white countries.
So in the summer of 1979, at a hotel in Lynchburg, Virginia, a group of influential religious and conservative leaders, including Jerry Falwell, Paul Weyrich, and former Nixon aide Howard Phillips, meet in secret to strategize on how white evangelicals could protect their agenda against the rising tide of inclusion.
They knew the Stop the Tax on Segregation wasn't really going to be a very appealing rallying cry for this new movement that they wanted to ignite. They sort of went down a laundry list of issues that they thought might sort of ignite a hyper-conservative counter-revolution. When they got to abortion, it was almost like a light bulb went off, and they were like, that could work. This is like around 6 years after Roe v. Wade was passed.
The majority in cases from Texas and Georgia said that the decision to end a pregnancy during the first 3 months belongs to the woman and her doctor, not the government.
When Roe v. Wade was passed, most Protestant Republicans supported it. The Southern Baptist Convention had passed resolutions in 1971 and 1974 affirming liberalization of abortion law. Ronald Reagan passed the most liberal abortion law in 1967. It's like really amazing to think about that now. They used the abortion issue to sort of unite that new movement.
What single issue could say more about a society's values than the degree of respect shown for human life at its most vulnerable, human life still unborn?
Your membership and belonging really hinges on that issue, but it's really, it's a modern creation, and it was created for political purposes.
Under Reagan, the Republican Party, historically concerned with tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations, uses the right to life as political camouflage. And soon, the GOP solidifies the working-class white parishioners of evangelical leaders as its new loyal base.
And so over time, these pro-choice voices were purged from the Republican Party. What we see today is almost a new religion, a pro-life religion.
The evangelical movement's elites are now kingmakers, delivering state and presidential elections to the politicians willing to protect their new religious benefactors. And just as the 60s saw church leaders playing a transformative role on both sides of the social upheavals, the so-called greed decade of the 1980s will see a new style of Christian preacher transform the relationships some Christian Americans have with their church.
Blessing has landed.
So I'm just telling you what I believe God's told me to tell you. You don't like it, talk to the boss.
Evangelicals take to the airways to deliver a new gospel.
I just need more.
And it will deliver unto them a new kind of political strength.
You can't defeat me. You cannot defeat a child of God.
Say it like you mean it.
We've all seen the gospel as preached on television.
You may gain some material things, but what if you lose with God? He controls the universe.
Joel Osteen has a $10 million mansion practically across the street from his $3 million mansion. Jesse Duplantis in 2018 asked his followers to buy him a $50 million jet.
You know, I've owned 3 different jets in my life, and used them and just burning them up for the Lord Jesus Christ.
Kenneth Copeland and his partner Gloria are worth upwards of $700 million and use their private jets to go to big game ranches and ski resorts.
This is a preaching machine.
Wealthy televangelists flaunting their possessions as a sign of God's bountifulness is not new.
You actually have televangelists at this point who are competing with one another over who can live the most glamorous lifestyles.
But these modern-day ultra-rich TV preachers aren't just interested in acquiring more and more money.
You understand what I'm saying?
Whatever you do right now, don't you stop tithing.
They are also interested in the political influence that money can buy. There has always been tithing, giving money to your church or temple to help others less fortunate. But in the 1980s, as cable television delivered hundreds of channels into people's homes, it created an opportunity for a new kind of church.
From coast to coast, live via satellite, it's time to praise the Lord.
For these evangelicals of the airwaves, tithing was something you did to help yourself. What you give to God, God returns to you 100-fold.
A believer in prosperity gospel means that God essentially is a glorified piñata. And if you strike at heaven long enough, riches and wealth will come tumbling down.
It dovetails with the ethos of the 1980s and the ways in which media put out a lifestyle. So if we think about television shows like Dynasty,
If the champagne is too burned for your taste, Miss Devereaux, don't drink it. The caviar, I trust, is not burned. I really wouldn't know. This is Osotrova, and I prefer Petrosian Beluga.
That had a connection, believe it or not, to the ways in which Jim and Tammy Faye Baker were living, with air-conditioned doghouses. And all of this promoted a lifestyle of God and wealth.
If all the demons in hell and all the bureaucrats in the world could stop me from building, when I go to heaven, he'd let me work on mansions.
If that pastor is driving around in a Rolls Royce and flying a private jet, his wealth is a sign of how much God wants you to be rich. This is pretty transparently a con.
You can't defeat me. You cannot defeat a child of God.
Congregants of Prosperity Ministries were told to give to God, but to send their money to the preacher's address. Failure to give enough was seemingly the only sin for which you'd be punished.
What keeps people in the pews in prosperity gospel churches is a sick downward spiral. You think if you give more, then you're going to get more. If you don't get more, you're chastised by your pastor to give more because you aren't giving enough. And so for many people, they don't know how to break out of that cycle.
If you're wealthy, you're one of God's chosen. If you're poor, you're part of the sinful masses.
It's a message viewers at home would hear again and again.
You need to make a vow of faith of $1,000. Oh, Bob, couldn't you say 25? No!
I don't understand why, but there's something happens at a level where people step into faith and give $1,000 that don't happen at other levels.
You're going to have a breakthrough through this $273 seed.
By the 1990s, the most egregious of the cable TV prosperity ministers had been brought down for preying on their parishioners.
Swaggart is stepping down from his powerful TV ministry while the Assembly of God Church investigates him for having an affair with a prostitute.
I have sinned against you, my Lord.
Their fall from grace was a wake-up call to other, more mainstream preachers to seek salvation not just from God, but protection against the laws of man from elected officials.
Historians write about the Reagan administration. What do you want them to say?
I guess maybe just that I helped perpetuate this great American dream.
In the new century, Prosperity Ministries made a comeback on TV.
One of my chandeliers costs more than most people's house. I got 22 chandeliers in the house.
But media reports raised questions about whether these preachers were paying their fair share to the government.
All of it is tax exempt, but should it be?
2007, prosperity gospel preachers were investigated by a Senate Judiciary Committee led by a Republican, Chuck Grassley.
Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa sent letters to 6 well-known TV churches across the country requesting financial records on compensation, expenses, and amenities, including use of fancy cars and private jets. That would violate nonprofit status under the tax code.
Investigators are digging into whether ministry resources are being diverted into an array of for-profit companies.
They thought, are these pastors taking advantage of their status just to enrich themselves?
Creflo Dollar, one of the prosperity preachers named by Grassley's committee, defended his church.
I just believe that the people that make an investment into the ministry should be the primary ones that we respond to and that we open our books up and we're transparent to, versus the watchdog people.
And there was such an outcry at the time against these pastors getting investigated at all.
He has a right to have what he has. This is America. You are able to drive what you want to drive, live where you want to live.
The committee pulled back and they said, well, we encourage these pastors to, self-reform.
Grassley had given the ministries a month to respond to his committee's questions. His requests were all but ignored, but some in the media continued to press the issue.
How much money did you pay for Tyler Perry's Gulfstream jet, for example?
Well, for example, that's really none of your business, but...
Isn't it the business of your donors?
Listen.
I think what's troubling is not just that they're taking advantage of their followers, but they're taking advantage of the rest of us through their public subsidies and tax exemptions.
In exchange for their lucrative tax-exempt status, religious institutions are supposedly constrained by the Johnson Amendment, which prohibits nonprofit organizations from endorsing partisan political candidates. But as the wealth of these churches grew, their leaders saw the value in using some of their parishioner-supplied wealth to exercise the political power needed to protect themselves.
They're not just having these sort of tax-exempt entities and lack of transparency for a means of amassing these fortunes, but also engaging in partisan politics at the same time.
Prosperity gospel is now talking about elections as a matter of demonic influence. Democrats winning is a matter of satanic influence.
The sound of victory.
You can hear it in the televised sermons.
We break and divide every demonic confederacy against the election, against America, against that who you have declared to be in the White House.
The media said Joe Biden's president. Ha, 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 ha.
Using all the powers of that con, that money con, to now put into play as a power con.
But could this power of the pulpit provide religious leaders protection from even the darkest allegations? Ask the Catholic Church.
You may not like who I am as much as you like who you think I am.
During John F. Kennedy's run for presidency in 1960, many believed his Catholic faith would make him unelectable. Anti-Catholicism was widespread, forcing the candidate to face it head-on.
The question is whether I think that if I were elected president, I would be divided between two loyalties, my church and my state. Let me just say that I would not.
Kennedy was able to overcome worries about him being a puppet of Rome. But in his home state of Massachusetts, where nearly half the population identifies as Catholic, the church exerted exactly the kind of political influence Kennedy denied existed. For decades, the Catholic leadership could act with near impunity, with little to fear from elected officials. When it comes to holding power to account, the Boston Globe's Michael Resendez knew there was no greater power in the city than the one wielded by the Catholic Church.
The city of Boston was the most Catholic city in the United States. And also, Boston was really a collection of Catholic, ethnic, blue-collar people who really revered the Catholic Church. The legislature responded to the Catholic Church whenever it wanted something, or whenever it sought to block something.
Something the Globe's investigative team Spotlight learned when it began looking into a lawsuit against Father John Geoghegan, a former Boston priest who was suspected of sexually abusing nearly 150 young boys over decades.
In a civil lawsuit, there is a process known as discovery when both sides turn over the evidence that they've accumulated that they may use at trial. But all of these documents were sealed by the court at the request of the Boston Archdiocese.
The head of the Archdiocese was one of the most powerful men in Boston. Cardinal Bernard Francis Law was also a media-savvy, charismatic figure.
You may not like who I am as much as you like who you think I am.
Cardinal Law was a very, very influential prelate, not only in the Archdiocese of Boston, but all over the United States. And he often hoped that he would become the first pope from the United States of America. Cardinal Law was friendly with the Reagan administration, played a role in the fact that Ronald Reagan won the state of Massachusetts twice. Cardinal Law was especially close to George Herbert Walker Bush. They had a friendship, just really understood how to play politics.
Cardinal Law's imposing presence helped the church remain off limits to the city's investigative journalists. But in 2001, a new editor at the Globe authorized the Spotlight team to dig deeper into the Father Geoghegan case.
So the first thing we did, we just called all our sources and asked them if they knew anything about the issue of clergy sex abuse. And pretty quickly, we came up with the notion that there was more than one bad priest, that there were other John Geoghans.
But they needed more than a notion. They needed proof. Enter Phil Saviano of SNAP, the survivors network of those abused by priests. For Saviano, it was personal.
I was sexually assaulted, I don't know, I remember 5 or 6 times specifically, mostly when I was 12 years old. The priest came to town on a new assignment, and the fact that I lived in the neighborhood and that I was the newspaper boy put me in contact with this priest quite a bit.
Saviano had spent years cataloging his own story and amassing evidence from other survivors.
Bill showed up in the Spotlight office, and he had a box of material for us to read. Several books, newspaper articles, magazine articles. One of the things in his box was a disc, and the disc contained expert testimony in a clergy sex abuse case from Texas. Estimated that only about half of all practicing priests were celibate. Of that number, 6% of priests were having sex with children.
Could the same be true of priests in Boston? The answer came from the church's own documents.
The Boston Archdiocese, like many other dioceses, publish an annual directory of clergy. So you can look up a particular priest and see where he's been assigned. A lot of priests had assignments that we didn't really understand. Like some priests were assigned to emergency response, some were sick leave, some were on loan. And eventually we got the notion that maybe these kind of strange assignments were euphemisms for priests who'd been accused of clergy sex abuse and had been put on the shelf. So we came to understand that emergency response meant that a priest was confined to the rectory. Sick leave often meant that a priest had been assigned to a facility for abusive priests. So all of these euphemisms, we decided to put them all together in one database. If 6% of clergy were having sex with children, 6% in the Boston Archdiocese would have translated to 90 priests, and that in fact was about the number that turned up in our database after we'd been through the church directories.
They had a smoking gun. The pattern was clear. Then, another breakthrough. The Globe is successful in lifting the confidentiality order on the church's sealed documents.
And the documents were released to the public, showing that Cardinal Law and his bishops all knew that John Geoghegan was a serial pedophile and had molested more than 150 children over 30 years in 6 different parishes.
We learned through the Spotlight investigation that there are a number of cases that police knew about, but they brought the cases to Cardinal Law and he convinced them not to tell anybody, to keep it quiet.
It took Spotlight's tireless investigation to finally overcome the church's power to protect its own.
But today, the thousands of documents once confidential both illustrated and underlined the mistake and tragedy.
We kept writing stories. We kept finding allegations against more abusive priests. And finally, Cardinal Law resigned on December 13th of 2002.
In 2017, Cardinal Law died in Rome at the age of 86. But the sex abuse scandal that he came to symbolize persists to this day.
The Catholic Church in America alone has now paid something like $4 billion to the victims of clergy sexual abuse. This is a very deep problem within the Catholic Church.
A problem the church saw a solution to in 2020. Resendez was reporting for the Associated Press when news of the federal government's pandemic relief paycheck protection program was announced by President Trump.
I asked Congress to pass the Paycheck Protection Program, giving small businesses emergency economic relief.
For many Catholic parishes, this program, designed to help struggling businesses make payroll at the height of the pandemic, was heaven sent.
We know that President Trump met with more than 600 Catholic officials in a teleconference situation, and during this meeting, President Trump explained that they were all going to be eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program, and he also reminded everyone that we were approaching an election. And what we noted is that a lot of the dioceses that had made big payments to survivors, in some cases dioceses that had filed for bankruptcy, they were awarded paycheck protection funds that allowed them to essentially replenish their coffers. This story and many other stories by many other reporters really do reflect the enduring power of the Catholic Church. Someday, the Associated Press won't exist. Someday, the Boston Globe won't exist, but the Catholic Church will endure.
Religious institutions have long wielded their political influence through generally accepted democratic norms. But some evangelical leaders have taken a decidedly anti-democratic approach to gaining power.
Now, many of our Christians want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote.
At stake is the very soul of our nation.
Barrett is a devout Catholic who's taken conservative stances on abortion, gun rights, and immigration. The Human Rights Campaign has called her a, quote, absolute threat to LGBTQ rights.
October 2020. The Senate is set to debate the third Supreme Court justice President Trump will place on the court. Conservative Christian Amy Coney Barrett.
Well, we're pleased today to welcome Judge Barrett.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse takes the floor to expose the dark forces he says are behind her nomination.
We look forward to working with you, Republicans in the Senate.
And a larger plot to undermine democracy.
This is a conservative activist behind-the-scenes campaign to remake the nation's courts, and it's a $250 million dark money operation.
The senator paints a grim picture of the state of our union, arguing a shadowy group of conservatives are leveraging their wealth to take over the courts and overturn popular policies supported by the majority of Americans.
They want judges to rule to reverse Roe, to reverse the Obamacare cases, and to reverse Obergefell and take away gay marriage. That is their stated objective and plan. Why not take them at their word?
While Christians make up 65% of the U.S. population, only 1 in 4 Americans identify as evangelical. That's still a massive voting bloc. And with 70% of those potential voters claiming to be conservative, evangelicals have often been the deciders in this country's elections.
When you accept Christ as a Savior, it changes your heart and changes your life.
Using their power to endorse politicians that will protect and promote a biblical worldview.
Our Savior died on a cross so your sins can be forgiven, and He doesn't want you to be quiet about it. He wants you to share the gospel and share it with everyone.
The right-wing Christian power elite and its donor base have long dreamed of seeing the government adopt its religious values as public policy. The plan to make this dream a reality first came together 4 decades ago.
August 1980 in Dallas, Texas, the biggies of conservatism have come together to make speeches, and Ronald Reagan is appearing in front of evangelicals.
This book will teach you about your economy.
James Robeson, a famous Dallas evangelist, said to Reagan, you should say this when you get up on stage.
Now, I know this is a nonpartisan gathering, and so I know that you can't endorse me, but I only brought that up because I want you to know that I endorse you and what you are doing.
And the crowd went wild. So that married evangelicals to a potential presidential candidate who looked out for their interests.
But getting evangelicals to vote for sympathetic candidates is only the first part of their plan to reshape America. The next speaker would reveal just how far they are willing to go.
The second thing that happens that very same day is a speech by Paul Weyrich.
Now, many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome. Good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote.
We don't want everyone to vote.
Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
And this is something that has been part and parcel of how evangelicals think about voting, too. As long as they can get the votes out for candidates who support their issues, then voting should not be extended to people who won't vote the way that they want them to vote.
The views expressed more than 40 years ago on that stage in Dallas would prove to be prophetic. Today, a new agenda is being set by an elite group of Christian power brokers that seeks to replace our secular democracy with so-called Christian nationalism, where Americans, regardless of their faith, would be governed in accordance with the Christian Bible. It's an ideology that's being pushed by a new brand of religious radicals.
I don't care what you think about fraudulent Sleepy Joe. He's a sex-trafficking, demon-possessed mongrel. He's of the left. He ain't no better than the Pope and Oprah Winfrey and Tom Hanks and the rest of that wicked crowd. God is gonna bring the whole house down.
It's not just political theater. Influential church leaders, highly funded think tanks, and secretive religious organizations are trying to transform the very fabric of American society.
Our society is inherently irreducibly pluralistic. So to assert that only members of a certain sort of elect group should dominate all aspects of government and society is extraordinarily divisive and unfair.
One of the most effective groups quietly pushing a religious agenda in Washington is a shadowy entity known as the family.
The family is the oldest and still the most influential Christian nationalist organization in Washington. What it tries to do is to gather those whom it feels are placed in power by God, senators, congressmen, military leaders, business leaders, tries to gather them into a biblical worldview, exporting American power around the world.
From its inception, the family has had a fondness for mixing Christianity with authoritarian power.
Laban Brady, the founder of the family in 1935, he sees working people organizing to get better working conditions and rights as a threat to his vision of Christian unity and Christian nation. In 1935, he's looking at German fascism and saying that's the future. After World War II, they would arrange for delegations of U.S. congressmen to travel to Germany so they could get the sage advice of these former Nazis.
The idea that America could learn from Nazi Germany was embraced by the family's next leader, Doug Coe, an elusive figure seen here in a rare piece of video.
Jesus said, you have to put me before other people, and you have to put me before yourself. Hitler, that was a demand to be in the Nazi Party. You have to put the Nazi Party and its objectives ahead of your own life and ahead of other people.
Doug Coe, this longtime leader and advisor to every president, Democratic or Republican, since Eisenhower. And Time magazine, in fact, once named him one of the most powerful religious leaders.
One of Coe's most enduring legacies is the family's annual event, the National Prayer Breakfast.
The President of the United States and the First Lady.
On its surface, it appears apolitical, but what the public sees is far from the full story.
The National Prayer Breakfast in Washington happens in February of every year. The president always speaks.
My special thanks to Bob Stump and Doug Coe.
Doug Coe and all of his associates. I'm grateful.
In fact, the Prayer Breakfast represents a week-long lobbying festival. It's about influence.
What is the end goal of all these shadow campaigns by well-heeled religious elites, and how would they reshape the country?
I think it is fair at this stage to use the F word, fascism. Christ has been displaced by the worldly strongman figure. You would certainly look at the loss of reproductive rights, the loss of LGBTQ rights, men being in places of authority. You would see white supremacy strengthened even more.
If you look at all of the voter suppression bills now that are being pushed and calling into question a fairly decided election, frankly, I don't even want to use the word conservative. It's a radical movement.
The president saying new laws in more than 16 states are part of a painful pattern aimed at denying minorities and women the right to vote.
You can see the anti-democratic nature of the movement.
It's a movement that, for some, has given way to visions of a coming apocalypse.
It's nearly impossible to determine exactly how many people have relocated to the region as part of this movement. They're guarded by their very nature.
As a growing Christian army seeks to take over a small corner of the U.S., what does it mean for the rest of us? Far from the nation's capital, a new army of Christian conservatives is assembling here in western Idaho and across the Northwest, arming themselves with a new theological dogma. And, according to local reports, they're arming themselves with an increasingly lethal arsenal.
Gun and ammo manufacturers driven out of other states by restrictive gun legislation. There are now 180 in Idaho alone.
There's been a huge increase of conservatives moving into Idaho. We kind of consider ourselves the last of the Mohicans.
They call this newly imagined state the American Redoubt.
The American Redoubt consists of Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and then eastern parts of the states of Washington and Oregon. The term American Redoubt was coined by James Wesley Rawls in 2011. Rawls is a former U.S. intelligence officer who went off the deep end, and he started a popular survivalist blog some years back.
We have a breaking news story. Protesters are on the streets of Los Angeles.
It isn't hard to find Rawls' apocalyptic rhetoric online.
When the big machine stops and things fall apart, it's going to get very, very ugly in the big cities and in the suburbs. And the only places with relative safety are going to be in lightly populated, food-producing areas.
Rawls believes in a sort of Christian theocratic idea of what the United States should be, that modern liberal society is unstable, that life in our decadent urban centers is going to fall apart. And so Rawls started telling people, get yourself a whole bunch of guns and join with your fellow patriots out here to be ready for the coming collapse.
It's a call to arms that has been heeded by a growing number of radical Christians from across the country.
The core of this movement is to help like-minded conservative Christians move to the redoubt area.
Rawls is clearly showing that he expects a war. He expects the American redoubt to have to defend itself with arms.
A group of professionals is helping train new arrivals, even providing them with homes that are ready-made for riding out the apocalypse.
I've seen the underground homes, the ones that people have dug or they've built on top of the ground but then buried the structure so you can't see it from the road at all.
It's nearly impossible to determine exactly how many people have relocated to the region as part of this movement. They're guarded by their very nature.
A secessionist movement like the American Redoubt is born out of a Christian nationalist ideology that seeks to consolidate power for a small group of believers.
Everything that Americans have held near and dear for generations, they are trying to systematically destroy.
To be self-reliant and to be proficient with firearms. That is your duty. That is your responsibility.
But this spiritual migration may only serve to destabilize the foundations of the country itself.
The end game of the American Redoubt is the world's going to end, and people up here are going to be, fighting Mad Max-style battles in the hills. I honestly think that some people want that to happen.
And the movement here is growing, or perhaps mutating.
It was a packed house Saturday morning in Roseburg.
In May 2021, 5 Oregon counties voted to secede from their state and join a newly imagined one they call Greater Idaho.
They want to expand the state of Idaho.
Portland and Salem politicians just don't have the same values anymore that we do here.
The message from these radicals is clear. There's safety in numbers.
Apocalyptic ideology is incredibly effective because it turns into something of a democratic kill switch.
And only by the grace of Jesus Christ are we awakened.
In which, when they don't win elections, when they do not have control over governmental bodies, they can claim that an apocalypse is nigh.
Going to the Capitol!
For some white evangelicals, January 6th was just another moment in the ways in which they think that the government should be put aside for a leader that they believe should be the real president. We have evangelicals right now who are being radicalized. Evangelicals are some of the highest number of people who believe that the pandemic was a scam, and their support of guns, God, and babies has allowed them to harden themselves against many of the things that are enshrined in law in America right now. They are not the people who they believe themselves to be. That is, the holders up of the soul of the nation. Rather, they are the people who are driving the nation's soul apart.